Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much to everybody who has dialed in already for our Oxford MBA Africa webinar this evening. My name is Hannah Griffiths. I'm one of our recruitment managers here at the Oxford MBA, and I'm going to be joined this evening by one of my colleagues and some of our students as well to give you some insight into our Africa initiative here at the Business School, and also have some of our students share their experiences to date and their insights with you as well. Before we get started, and while we're waiting for a couple more people to join, I just want to make sure that everyone who has dialed in already can hear me. So if you can hear clearly, can you just type a yes, and we can see them pop up here. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm very delighted to say that I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Tammy Brophy also. So Tammy is our Africa Initiative Manager, and she's going to be speaking a little bit this evening about our Africa Initiative and giving you some more insights into the focus that we have in the Business School. So I'm just going to get Tammy to introduce herself quickly and make sure that you can all hear her as well.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Yes, this is Tammy. As Hannah mentioned, I'm the Africa Initiative Manager. I hope that you can all hear me. So if you can continue sending the yeses through, that would be great. And then we can carry on with the session. Perfect. So as Hannah had already begun, that the school has a very strong Africa focus. Since 2014, the Dean made a pledge to have more than 10% of our class coming from Africa each year. The photo that you're looking at now is actually the first intake where we did receive 10%. But if you were to look at averages across other business schools, mostly international MBA programs have about 2% of their class coming from Africa. In fact, only 1.9% of all MBA students are African. So to aim for that 10% was a very strong and high ambition for the school, but also was a reflection of our dedication and commitment, not only to the students and the talent that exists on the continent, but also to having a positive impact on the continent. So since 2014, we have been working really hard on ensuring that we can identify strong potential candidates. I spend a lot of time on the continent along with my colleagues, traveling around to ensure that we can increase accessibility for candidates that are looking to come onto the program. This has included a number of other things that we have done beyond recruitment. So I'll talk a little bit more around what would you get from the MBA that would be able to support your Africa career goals and ensure that you're able to both focus on a global market, but how would you apply that within an African context? So this is the fourth year with 10% of our class coming from Africa. Within that, we have, so that's 13%. Within that, we actually have 13 African nationalities. So it's got quite a Pan-African representation. And we're very proud to actually have 52% of all our African students that are women. So it's also something that we're very proud of and we feel is reflective of the talent on the continent. However, we also realized that it wasn't enough to simply just have 10% of the class coming from Africa. How would we truly be able to measure that impact post-MBA, and how would we be able to ensure that we're not just taking amazing talent from the continent and not creating opportunities for them to return to Africa? So the vast majority of our African students do return to Africa. It ranges around 70% of all our students do return. However, we do recognize for a group of our African students that sometimes it is useful to gain international experience and exposure and be able to take some of those learning outcomes and return to Africa. So we cater for both of those pockets, and we also do cater for the diaspora, so the African candidates that are based in other parts of the world that are looking to use the MBA to return to Africa. So as we moved and evolved from just focusing on recruitment, we realized that obviously funding is a key component, and Hannah and our students can chat a little bit more around some of the scholarships. But I spend a lot of my time ensuring that we're able to create scholarship opportunities for our students. So at least 60% on average of our African students receive a scholarship each year. And that is well beyond what the actual class average is, so what we'd be looking at global sort of scholarships. So that is very much a reflection of the school's commitment to ensuring that the financial barrier that exists for a lot of African candidates is not something that is essentially a barrier to considering Oxford. In fact, the Dean and his wife personally fund the Africa Dean Scholarship each year. And again, that is very much a personal commitment that he has made to this initiative and to Africa. We also have something called the Oxford Africa Business Alliance. So this is what you would imagine as perhaps an Africa student group, and what a lot of other business schools and universities will have clubs and networks. We have taken this a couple of steps further than that. So for us, the Africa Alliance is a joint partnership between our student group, our alumni network, as well as the business school and the wider Oxford University. So it's to solidify again both our commitment on the continent, but also to create greater opportunities for our students and alumni to be able to engage with thought leaders on the continent, to be able to engage with faculty within the university, and really be able to drive certain activities around career development, so looking at internships and consulting projects, as well as being able to create events in Oxford and on the continent that are able to share some of the insights that we're learning at Oxford, as well as some of the learning outcomes on the continent. So we actually run the Oxford Africa Business Forum, which is another major activity. That's our flagship event. That's held in March each year, so I spend a significant proportion of my time on that forum. Each year we create new themes, and this year is on the youth of Africa. So how do you access the youth as an opportunity, but how do you navigate some of the challenges that youth bulge presents on the continent? We bring thought leaders to the continent. We've had, to Oxford. We've had heads of state, business leaders, individuals working in policy and regulation. We have entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and it's a really great way to network with a very wide group of individuals that can support anything from new ideas to investments, and be able to take those concepts back to Africa. We would also host a number of different distinguished speaker events. We've had the president of Ghana, Botswana, we've had former presidents, CEOs. And I think what's important to highlight with all of these events, it's not just about having this platform and you just hear speakers speaking essentially to you. It's about allowing an opportunity for our students to actually sit with some of these thought leaders on the continent and have very personalized, in-depth conversations on what are the challenges, how can they be supported in some of the ideas. And so that's quite a unique opportunity as a student to share essentially a platform with some of these individuals. Something that we're particularly proud of is a number of our African-based electives, as well as Africa-focused electives. So there's now 4 Africa electives that we run. They are both in Oxford, as well as some are in Africa. So it's very important for both African students and non-African students that are wanting to learn about what are the business opportunities on the continent. How do you do business on the continent? What are some of the cultural impacts? How do you navigate regulations and policies? What are the differences between the countries on the continent? And so it's been extremely popular, and I think it's a great way, again, if you are looking to return to Africa, to be able to apply everything that you learn on the MBA through an African lens. And I think it's very important for us to mention the corporate engagement piece. And I think, for us as an institution, business is definitely a core focus for us. But what is the connection between business and society? What is the role of business within the governance space? And so for us, it's around how can businesses play a part in some of the things that are traditionally known as only for governments to focus on. So education and infrastructure, skills development, youth unemployment. So we really work with our companies to not only just create opportunities for you as a student looking to return, but also how can you learn from some of their policies that they're implementing, and how are they working closer with different governments on the continent as well. Our alumni are a very useful sort of resource for you. We have a number of chapters across the continent, but I think really being able to tap into that network and being able to work closer together across different countries and different sectors is a very useful opportunity. So that alumni base is growing every year. You obviously will have a global alumni base as well, but I think really building that sort of network on the continent is extremely valuable. So that's our Africa focus in a snapshot. We have a number of other different activities that you could get involved in, but I think the main sort of message to get across is obviously the school's commitment has been there. We've shown that we've had more than 10% over the last 4 years, which is a record for any international business school. But it's also so much more around how we can engage with Africa. And I think that's so important for our non-African student body, is that it's not so much about what we can teach people on the continent, it's about what can our African students teach people in the program and our faculty and within the wider university base. So you'll hear more from our students and they can tell you a little bit more about their experiences, but I'll hand over to Hannah to actually run through a little bit more detail of the actual program now.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Before we move on to the next little section of the webinar today, I did forget to mention at the beginning, if as you're listening, you do have any questions that you would like to send through to us, please do. In particular, I'm sure that lots of you will have questions for our current students who will be joining us for our panel in about 15 minutes time. So do please send through any questions that you have. Tammy's also going to stay on the line as well, so if we do get any questions through specifically about the Africa initiative, she'll be happy to give some more information about that as well. So we're going to move on now and look a little bit more at the MBA programme itself and talk a little bit about the application process. We're not going to talk about this in lots of detail today. We do run a number of webinars that are specifically focused on the application process, and there's lots of hints and tips available. So do sign up to one of those in the future if you do want some more detailed information than what we're going to give today. But essentially what I do want to focus on in the next few minutes is just looking at maybe some misconceptions that people have about the profile of the class here, and maybe some barriers that exist to people applying for the programme, and just chat a little bit more about those. And then, as I said, any questions that you have about the process, do feel free to pop them through. So obviously one of the key differences between the Oxford MBA and some other MBA programmes that you may have looked at is that our programme is a one-year programme. And there's obviously lots of benefits that come with that, most of which are self-explanatory, so lower opportunity costs, less time away from your career. It's important to highlight that the Oxford MBA is an intensive programme. I'm sure that's something that our student panel will attest to when they speak to you shortly. It is a full 12-month programme, and it does include everything that you would anticipate finding on a 2-year MBA programme. So the opportunity for internships, the opportunity for international travel during your year with us. The programme includes all of those things, but just packed into a shorter period. So it's good to be aware in advance of coming on to the Oxford MBA that it is a very intense year. In general, we find that our students tend to thrive on that intensity, and then actually it's something that becomes quite a positive element of the programme for them. It is probably also important to mention that a one-year MBA may not be for absolutely everybody. If you are somebody who is maybe considering making quite a drastic change in your career, but you're not quite certain what that is or where you want to go with that, then a 2-year programme is something that might be of more value for you. But if you're someone who has a clear idea of where they're looking to get to and is looking to take a shorter time out of your current career and just get maybe a better return on investment, then a 1-year programme is definitely an option that you might be looking to consider. We also offer our 1+1 MBA program. And again, I'm not going to talk about this in too much detail today, but it is a possible option for anybody who would be considering possibly 2 years of study. So on the first year of the Oxford 1+1, you would do a master's degree on one of our partner programs at one of the Oxford colleges that make up the university here. I think at this point there's about 40 different partner programs that are available, and there's lots of information about those on our website. So your first year in Oxford, you would be studying for whichever master's program it was that you had opted for. And then in your second year, you would join us here at the business school to do your 1-year MBA. The 1+1 is really a good option for anybody who is interested in doing a deep dive into a particular subject area that's of real interest to them, that will help them progress in their career, or maybe is just a real kind of passion project area for them. And the idea being that after you've done that first year deep dive into that subject, you then use the second year to look how you would apply that knowledge to kind of the broader world of business by joining us here at the business school. Again, for anybody who's maybe looking for a bit of additional time in terms of a career transition, as I said, and who needs maybe a little bit less intensity than just the 1-year MBA, then the 1+1 program might be a good option for you. And there's also an excellent scholarship opportunity that comes attached to the 1+1 program, which is our Pershing Square Scholarship. So we're going to talk about scholarships a little bit more in a couple of slides time, but the Pershing Square is a scholarship that is attached solely to the 1+1 program. And it means that you would have essentially 2 fully funded years here in Oxford, and also get a living allowance to support you on during your time here as well. So it's an excellent opportunity attached to the 1+1 program. So Tammy has mentioned a little bit already about the profile of our class in terms of our African students. So here we just have a little bit of a broader overview of our class in general this year. Lots of this information is already available on our website, and so I'm only going to highlight a couple of the key points that we really want to make you aware of today. The first is one that Tammy has already mentioned, which is our commitment to the number of female students that we have on programme here. So in our current cohort, 44% of our class are female, which is something that we're really proud of here at the business school. It's obviously something that is still very much a work in progress, and something that we would essentially like to eventually be at a 50-50 split, which is what we think it should be. And so that's a focus that we're very much still continuing with and that we hope to achieve in the coming years. Essentially, the next 3 points that you can see on the slide are what I want to focus on here, and that's the work experience range, the GMAT range, and the age range. And the main thing that I want to highlight from those 3 points is the word range. So I think sometimes when people do some research into MBA and the profile of their classes, you'll see the word average used a lot. So in terms of the average GMAT score within a class and the average number of work experience that some of our students have. However, we very much take a broad range into the programme when it comes to those things. So in terms of work experience, that ranges anywhere from 2 years work experience all the way up to kind of 15 or 16 years. If you are towards the lower end of that spectrum, so you've only been kind of in the world of work for maybe 2 years, we do look for certain elements within your experience. So maybe some international experience during those 2 years, some examples of career progression across those 2 years, and maybe any leadership opportunities that you've had during that time. But essentially, if you have been in the world of work for 2 years, that meets our minimum requirement, and we would definitely still consider you for a place on the programme. Similarly, if you're a little bit further on in your career and you've maybe been in the workplace for 10, 11, 12 years, that certainly doesn't mean that it would be a negative aspect of your application. With work experience, we're really looking to make sure that anybody who comes on programme can contribute to the class, and that the other students who are around you can really benefit from your experiences to date. So it is a much broader range than maybe people anticipate. We're going to move on quickly to the dreaded GMAT. I'm sure there are lots of people listening who, if you have done any research into or have already started your preparation into GMAT, may not be your favourite aspect of the application process. And again, I just want to highlight the range of scores that students who come onto the programme here have. So that goes anywhere from about a 510 all the way up to a 790. So obviously those are kind of the extreme ends of the spectrum. A lot of our students will maybe be somewhere more in the middle of those scores. But the main thing that I do want to highlight is not to let the GMAT be a barrier to your application. If you have been doing preparation and you have sat your GMAT and your score is somewhere in the 500s and you think that that means that there's absolutely no possibility for you to apply, that is most certainly not the case. We really make sure here that we review all of our applications holistically, and it might be that your application is really strong in some other areas and just your GMAT is slightly lower. We're obviously also very aware that GMAT scores will vary depending on the part of the world that you come from. There are some parts of the world where standardized tests are very much a part of their education system the whole way through, and other parts of the world where they don't feature at all. And so that's why, again, just emphasising that range is really important. Similarly, with our age range, it's maybe slightly broader than people anticipate. So if you have any doubts about whether you're too young or too old, hopefully the range there will, again, just let you see that that shouldn't be a barrier to you maybe considering an application further down the line. So again, we're going to talk very quickly about our application requirements. And again, I know lots of questions might come through in connection to this. We're not going to focus on it too much today, but this is just to give you more of a broad overview of the aspects of the application which are mandatory and which, if you are thinking of applying, that you'll have to start considering now. So everybody who applies for the programme needs to have an undergraduate degree. Again, I'm sure there are lots of people that will have questions about what level of degree that you need to have. And obviously degree conversions and things like that vary from different parts of the world. So we look for an equivalent in general of a UK 2-1 degree. It might not be clear to you if the undergraduate degree that you have actually translates into that, but please don't worry about that. That's something that our team here will look after for you when they're processing your application. GMAT or GRE score we've already mentioned. It is mandatory. Unfortunately, there is no possibility to waiving the GMAT or GRE. Again, our students who've just joined me are all nodding, looking very solemn when we're talking about the GMAT or GRE. So everybody who applies for the programme does have to submit a GMAT or GRE score as part of their application. Professional experience, again, we've already mentioned. And again, as I said, if you are to the lower end of the spectrum, just make sure that your professional experience shows examples of the 3 points that we've mentioned earlier. You'll need to provide 2 referees to support your application. Those can be academic or professional, or a combination of both. We would definitely recommend, if you're going to select an academic referee, that you make sure that it's somebody who knows you well and can write about you in a lot of detail. If you want to opt for 2 professional referees, that's absolutely fine as well. You will also write a supporting statement as part of your application, which is essentially your opportunity to highlight any aspect that you haven't managed to detail in your application up to that point to the committee who will review your application. And then the 2 final elements. So we have the online assessment, which is a new element of the application process this year. This is essentially your opportunity to bring your application to life. It involves you answering 4 video recorded questions and 1 written question. It's a timed assessment, so you'll have 90 seconds to answer the questions that you have been asked. And it's really an opportunity for you to communicate to us your passions, your motivations behind wanting to do the MBA, why the Oxford MBA is of interest to you, and then maybe some experiences and skills that you've developed through your work experience to date as well. The final element that is probably important for us to mention is the English language proficiency. So again, this is something that can't be waived unless you have completed your undergraduate degree 100% in English. So if you have, and you can provide us with proof that your full undergraduate degree was taught in English, then you don't need to worry about the English language proficiency element. For everybody else, unfortunately, you do have to worry about that. And essentially, most of our applicants will look at doing a TOEFL test or an IELTS test as part of their application as well. We have 4 application deadlines across the year. So these are the dates from this year. So for anybody listening who's considering applying for entry in 2021, the dates for those application stages haven't been decided quite yet, but essentially they will follow a similar timeline to this. So stage 1 in September, stage 2 November, and stage 3 in January. For anybody who is considering scholarships, and in particular applying for any scholarships to support your application, it's really important that you apply in stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3. For anybody who waits until the stage 4 deadline, and for anybody listening who is maybe still thinking of applying for stage 4 for entry this coming September, there will be a small number of scholarships still available, but the majority that are connected to other partners across the wider university, the deadlines for application for those is the January deadline. So again, if you are thinking of applying in 2021, do keep an eye on our website for when the deadline dates for entry at that point will be published. And finally, just before we move on to our student panel, we're just going to talk a little bit about scholarships. So on the slide here, we basically just have a snapshot of the scholarships that are available for you. We have a large number of scholarships available, some that we manage here at the business school, and then others that are connected with some other departments and organisations across the wider university. They vary in terms of the amount of funding that they can provide you with, and also there is an additional application element for some of those scholarships as well. So again, some of them will involve writing an additional essay and possibly having an extra interview also. The main thing that I want to highlight really in relation to the scholarships and funding is, again, similar to the GMAT and what I was saying earlier, don't allow funding to be a barrier to submitting an application. We have a huge range of scholarships available, some which are specifically for students coming from Africa. And again, that's something that some of our student panel here might chat a little bit more about as we move on to the next stage. But I would say if you're considering an application, focus on the application itself to start, secure a place on the programme, and then you can take a look at the funding options and opportunities that are there for you to try and make sure that you can get your place on the programme. So that was a very, very quick overview of our programme. So as I said, we do run some webinars that are more specifically focused on the application process and the programme. So do please sign up and dial into one of those if you want any more information about that. But I am delighted to say that we are now joined by our student panel. And so in a second, I'm going to go around and ask them all to introduce themselves and give you a little bit more information and background about where they come from and their motivations behind being here on programme. As they are chatting to you, I'll start by putting a few questions to them, but anybody who does have any questions that you'd like our student panel to answer, please do send them through. I will monitor them as the students are speaking to you, and then we can put those to them as well and hopefully get some of your questions answered. So welcome everyone. So to start, I'm just going to go around and ask you all just to introduce yourselves, say where you've come from, and maybe just a bit about what you were doing before you came on programme, and maybe about the motivation behind you coming to do an MBA. Perfect. Right, Raboni, do you want to start?
Awesome. So hi everybody, it's Raboni Shaku. I'm South African from Joburg. Before the program, I was mainly in management consulting. I spent most of my time in Joburg and I spent a year in New York. Why the program? So I have a background in engineering, but my passion has always been towards business, and particularly helping business act more responsibly or leverage opportunities to create impact. So coming to the business school, and I'll speak later about why specifically Oxford, but for me an MBA was to solidify my space within business and to say that sort of I've earned my right to play in the space. And Oxford specifically because of it's really one of the few universities that are earnest about their commitment to changing the narrative regarding the role that business has to play in the wider society, and that was close to my heart. So that's why I'm here. Over to you, Kaya.
Hello, my name is Kaya. I'm also from South Africa, originally from Johannesburg, but I've spent some time in Cape Town. My career was also in management consulting, actually at the same company as Rebone, and my year was spent in Canada. The reason why I decided to do an MBA at this stage was because I felt like I wanted a transition in my career, and I didn't want to do a transition in my career before I had done my MBA. I had always wanted to do an MBA because I know of the benefits of having that kind of qualification if you are pursuing a global career. I'm happy to go into why I chose Oxford later on.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Omar. I'm from Egypt. Career-wise, I come from a banking background, investment banking, and I spent most of my career between Singapore and Dubai. I then moved on to an industrial startup, which sort of combined my background in engineering with my business background in finance. I decided to do an MBA for various reasons, to be honest. Partly to get a break, but also to further build my acumen, my business acumen, my network and my contacts in the business space. And obviously Oxford particularly, I only applied to one school and that was Oxford. And I can get into more detail why Oxford was the perfect fit for me. But perhaps as a taster, I'm on the older side of the spectrum in terms of the age bracket, and the 1-year format at Oxford made a lot of sense. Similar to what Rebone was saying, I think Oxford is very genuine about the interest in Africa and the work they do in Africa, and this is reflected in the percentage of African students on the cohort, 13% in the last year, and that is industry leading by a very wide margin if you look at global MBAs. So yeah, so that's why I'm here, and I'm going to pass it on to Diana.
Hi, my name is Diana Ongari. I'm from Kenya. I trained as a medical doctor, and along the way, I decided to become an entrepreneur. So I'm a healthcare entrepreneur, and we ended up setting up a group of clinics in Kenya, which scaled. And so as we're scaling, it became important to first have the business acumen, but also to grow a network within the continent. And so Oxford was one of a few business schools that Omar, as Omar mentioned, had that focus on impact and also Africa as well. And high priority on that list was not just a school that offers the business aspect of it. Oxford gives you a wider network to other departments and schools, right? Unlike most other schools whereby you'll be segregated in sort of just the business environment, right? So Oxford allowed for that networking opportunity. And I mean, it was also a 1-year degree, so that certainly was a big player, a big factor. So yeah,
Thank you.
Hi everyone, last but not least, I'm Toyosi, Nigerian. Before the MBA, I have a startup focused on connecting companies in Africa to private investors, but I also kind of double like as a management consultant. So seems like there's a theme in the room on management consulting. Very, very skewed towards management consulting. So why an MBA? Very, very similar to all my other colleagues in the room. So for me, the main one is it's a career transition. I'm hoping to move into VC post my MBA, venture capital, sorry. And also kind of like Rebone, I'm trying to earn my right that yes, I deserve to be at the table. Why Oxford? Well, first of all, it doesn't make any sense to do an MBA unless you're doing it at an Ivy League school. Brand and prestige is absolutely important. I would argue that some business schools may be good business schools, but then they might not have strong brands everywhere in the world. They're not known everywhere in the world. Oxford has what is known, even, I mean, I'm Nigerian, so even in villages in Africa, everybody knows Oxford University. So there's that, there's the passion, just speaking about Africa, that there is the commitment that Oxford has to Africa, both in terms of the dean's commitment, the scholarships, the cohort, as Omar said, is 13% this year, and I think it's been growing since the dean made a commitment. Other things around the opportunities for entrepreneurship, to get involved in entrepreneurship more generically. So whether that's the Oxford Seed Fund, which is a small VC fund that focuses on startups across the university, or things like Creative Destruction Lab, where you kind of double as a consultant for tech companies. So Oxford creates that environment. And last but not the least, might sound a bit cheesy, but to be honest, it was the people. I met Amy Major, I met Sir Lou, the alumni, people who were coming in terms of the cohort, and there was consistency in all those different kinds of people. I mean, people often think MBAs are a bit stuck up, but when I met all the people across the different faculties and whatnot, there was a lot of consistency in the way they were. So for me, that sealed it all. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of context as to why I chose Oxford.
Okay. Thank you guys very much, and all the staff obviously always appreciate a shout out. So this is now officially the best student panel that I have done. Thank you. So Toya, you touched a little bit there on the appeal of Oxford. Just before we move on, does anybody want to say anything else about that? Maybe if you were considering any other schools and what it was about Oxford in the end that made you choose to do your MBA here.
Well, for me, there was two additional things to what my colleagues have mentioned. I think the very social focus of the program, something that appealed for me for somebody that's trying to transition into a career in impact, as well as the very international cohort. What I found is that American schools are very American. The majority of the people that attend are American, the content is American. And me being an African that wants to return to Africa and have impact there, I just found that going to a school that has pledged that it wants to develop the people and develop the continent of Africa kind of made it a no-brainer.
Anyone else want to add anything there, Omar?
Yeah, perhaps just a couple of things from my side. Like I said, I think the structure of the program, the 1 year was particularly relevant in my case, because I did not want to be away from my full-time job, whatever that may be in the future, for too long. And that I think makes a lot of difference as you become more and more experienced. And I think increasingly, obviously, MBAs in general, sort of the value of MBAs have been in question for a number of years now. So that becomes a really relevant point when you're making your decision. Do you go for a 2-year program, or is it better off that you find the middle ground if you're doing a full-time MBA? So that was one. The second, the great thing about Saïd, and it's also similar in some of the American schools, less so in Europe, is that it's part of the University of Oxford. It's not a standalone business school like some of our other competition. So that gives you a much wider platform beyond the business school, as Teosi was saying. There's a lot more happening within the wider Oxford ecosystem that you as an MBA can sort of tag onto and engage with. That can be in the sciences sort of departments, STEM, humanities, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of value in being connected to that wider Oxford ecosystem. I think those 2 points were quite important for me. And yeah.
I mean, just as Omar and Kaya mentioned, outside those factors, there's also the scholarship, right? So availability of Africa-focused or African student support is quite vast here, even if it's not just within the business school, outside the business school, the wider Oxford University, right? There's an entire page dedicated to Africa-based students. So that was definitely a big contributor.
Brilliant, thank you guys. Thank you to everybody as well who's sending questions through. And we will get to some of your questions before the end, so do please keep sending them if you think of anything as we're chatting through this. There's some great ones coming through already. And just to keep the panel motivated, we have had a lovely comment through from somebody thanking you all for sharing your insights and saying that you've already made them feel more confident about potentially applying, which is really nice. So you're obviously doing a great job. So I wondered if you could all just maybe share, I know you're only into your second semester, so obviously you're kind of not even halfway through the program quite yet, but anything that's been a top highlight for you so far, or maybe anything that has surprised you since you've come on program?
Yeah. So it's almost to the theme that Omar and Toyosi were saying in terms of the availability of different pockets, whether it's like workshops or whether it's like talks at different departments. But I was surprised at how I'm actually free, the level of freedom I have to craft my own experiences outside the lecture hall. And I came in with one vision, so I feel like the first semester I was like pushing hard on impact related stuff, so impact investing, boot camps, and like SDG talks, all of that. And then as the year went on, I sparked the curiosity in terms of digital and technology. And I believe like for the past term, I've just been doing like AI workshops, like Python this and machine learning that. And it's really, yeah, it was surprising, but it's a really beautiful element of the school because yeah, you come in and there's just so much to feed your curiosity.
So I'm gonna not counter it, but I'm gonna put a caution on that. So the one-year MBA program is pretty intense. It's quite back-to-back, you know, in terms of academia. But then at the same time, there are events happening all the time. So there's talks here, there's events here, there's the Oxford Union, there's a social here. And you have to learn to know how to prioritize and decide what is good for you, not what everyone else is going to. And because you only have a year, you have to be quite focused in that. It's okay if you don't know what you want to do, but I think to explore the opportunities that are available to you, you really have to be intentional about what you go to and when you go to them. That's what I'd say.
I agree with you because there's such a wide variety that it won't serve you purpose to go to a little bit of everything. Yeah. But there's enough for you to really do a like deep dive and immerse yourself into one aspect or one sector or one interest. Yeah. So the idea is not for you to experience everything, but everyone will have what they need.
I mean, that also reflects in terms of the prep work you have to do, for example, if you're coming to the school. So think about what you want to do and sort of have almost a short checklist that I'd be interested in these areas and I want to explore in these areas as well. Then in that case, it sort of guides the events you go to, which clubs you sign up on, and it gives you that focus. Otherwise, you would get here and you get a sense of, I have 100 things to do. Which one do I say no to? I don't want to say no to this, but it does help to sort of have a guiding compass, right? And you don't have to have it figured out, but have a short list that these are the areas.
Sort of related to that, I was surprised by the energy that our cohort has.
You thought
both
you wouldn't
in
make
the
it.
class. But we're older, right? The average age is what, 28, 29.
Yeah,
But,
29, I think.
but people are able to deliver in class and deliver on the dance floor as well with equal measure. So that kind of surprised me. I thought we were all old.
I feel like that's an important element
I
of doing
agree.
MBA that people may
100%.
not have considered in advance.
Yeah.
So it's good to put that out there as well. Anyone want to add anything? No? Good. I feel like that was good mix there, good balance. So something that we have had a couple of questions through on and that we've touched on but maybe not spoken about in much detail is your college experience and maybe what that's added to your time so far. So if you could maybe say a little bit about the college that you're part of and maybe any extracurriculars or anything that you do in connection to your college, that would be brilliant.
So the collegiate system is sort of quite unique, and it was fairly new to me, a bit confusing at first, but then it became sort of an integral part of the experience here at Oxford. I'm part of Pembroke College, so I'm sort of associated to the University of Oxford through Saïd Business School as well as Pembroke College. And the college sort of provides this second avenue for not only sort of academic support, but also social and a whole range of extracurricular activities. So I'm actually on the football team for Pembroke, the MCR, sort of the older football team for Pembroke. And that's been a great experience. We have weekly football games along with other colleges in Oxford, as well as training sessions. So there's a whole different community element that this collegiate sort of association brings to the table as well. There's also a lot of sort of funding and scholarship opportunities that come with your colleges. The formals, everyone will talk about formals and dinner experience. You share meals with PhDs from various sort of backgrounds and fields, and you learn, as what you're saying, sort of the latest in AI, machine learning, as well as biology and medicine. And that all happens sort of almost on a weekly basis. So the college experience is definitely one of the highlights of being here in Oxford. But like Teofi was saying, it's also a balance. You have to balance between sort of your various commitments, but it's definitely something that you should explore and weigh in when considering your MBA choice.
I mean, again, it goes back to sort of what your priority is and what are you interested in, because I'm a member of GTC, which is one of the newer colleges, Green Templeton College. And one of the reasons I chose that college is it has the largest cohort of MBAs, right? So that means they're very keen on supporting the MBA programs. They have funding tailored to business school programs. And it's a diverse cohort in the sense that you do find that people with medical background, given my background is in medicine as well. And it does have a lot of opportunities to interact with PhD students, whereas other colleges, I think, maybe are more focused on sports, for example. Others are richer for sure. So in that case, they're able to support a lot of extracurricular activities. So it goes back to what's your priority and what are you interested in? Do you want to try rowing, for example? What's the college that's best at that? Those different priorities as well. Touching on the extracurricular, I mean, Oxford does offer quite a lot in terms of extracurricular. A lot.
Yeah. I almost went a cappella on the first week. I had to stop myself.
Right. But so there is a lot, whether within the business school and outside the business school as well. I I know I had set out a priority to stretch myself while I was here. So I ended up to signing up on quite a few things. I serve as the Entrepreneurship and Innovation co-chair under the Oxford Business Network. And those are options. There are Students' Council options as well. You have impact investing clubs. There are tracks, students-led tracks as well. So there are quite a few options, and it's again based on what you're interested in.
Brilliant. So I think we are going to move on to some of the questions that have come through, because I'm conscious that we might run out of time, and some of them thankfully are kind of in the same vein. So we'll go through those. So we've had a question through asking you guys what you felt made your application strong when you applied. Anyone have any insights into how you got here? Apart from what you've demonstrated already.
So wow, okay. So this is a very good question. I wonder, I suspect part of the reason why I was considered maybe because I have a kind of historical attachment to Oxford. So my granddad got his law degree here many years ago. Similar to Omar, I'm one of the older people in the cohort. And then my mom got her medical degree here. And I tried to get into Oxford for my undergrad, and I was kicked out. So I think they were like, okay, this guy clearly wants to come to Oxford, and he has history there. No, but I'm just kidding. So there's the essay part, I think, is the time when you can be as creative as you want to be, assuming that the question is the same. And it was just okay. So the question was, it gave me the opportunity to talk about something I was really passionate about. And so I think in that the passion and the interest that I had going forward post MBA and how the MBA aligned with that basically came out in my essay. I think that was one of the things, probably, I think maybe the main thing that switched it over for me personally.
I think for me, it was a combination of a couple of factors. I think I really sat down and thought about the essay before writing it, made sure that what I was going to say was something that was going to be worthy of an offer. The second is my references. I gave my referees, substantial time to think about what they would write about me. Told them way in advance and told them when it was due, etc. Yeah, I think those are the main two elements that made my application stand out.
And we've had another question kind of in connection to that, where someone has asked if any of you can say anything about your interview and if you enjoyed that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, it all comes down to sort of being genuine and really knowing what you want out of this experience. And you have to remember that this is not you being interviewed as much as it is an opportunity for you to also interact with people from the school and interview us as sort of students, as well as administrative staff or faculty and so on. So I think obviously the interview is your opportunity to sort of explore the school as well as present your best self. It should not be sort of a stressful situation or any such thing. And generally, as the guys were saying, just being genuine in your application. Obviously, you have to check the boxes. This is the University of Oxford, and we are selective. You have to be academically strong, and this also, given the structure of the program, is one way to protect you because you have to be academically strong to keep up with the pace of the program. But we're looking for genuine people. We're looking for people who want to make a difference, who understand our offering, because our offering is differentiated from other schools. And that's it. Just enjoy the experience and But yeah, that's all.
My advice would be just prepare as much as possible before the interview.
But at the same time, don't be nervous.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's a two-way street, because you have to also make sure that the school is right for you, right?
Yeah.
It's a massive decision, I'm assuming, for us and everyone on this call.
Yeah.
So yeah, just obviously prepared like as you would for a job interview.
Yeah.
But then don't put pressure on yourself. If it's right for you, it will happen.
Okay, we've had a great question through about the Africa elective, which is something we haven't touched on yet. So it says, could you please talk more about the Africa elective offered? Anybody who is participating wants to say anything about the Africa elective?
And maybe I can in there, Hannah, because they haven't had it yet.
There you go. Go for it, Tammy.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a number of actual Africa electives. So the one that's been running for a few years now is the international elective, which is on growth prospects and opportunities for business in Africa. We take about 50 to 60 students every year. It's held in South Africa, but it will be moving to different countries each year as it expands. And again, the main aim of that elective is to connect with companies and individuals, but specifically companies that work across the continent. Although it's based in one country, we definitely have a pan-African view. It's about getting first-hand sort of experience and insights with those individuals from these organizations. It's a mix of company visits, having guest speakers, and then we also do a bit of a cultural element to it to truly understand the environment in which business is done in Africa as well. So I will be very proud about the fact that it's been the #1 rated elective for the last 4 years out of all the electives on the MBA program. So it's very popular. It's been hugely successful. And I think the way to measure that success by the students, I would say, is one of two things. And I think that's for non-African students, that they're able to, truly be able to understand the context of what are the opportunities in Africa, and then be able to take that within a global sort of perspective, and be able to hold their own in conversations around perhaps, doing deals in Nigeria and what are the impacts of healthcare in Kenya, for example. And then I think for our African students, it's really important for African students to be able to understand their neighbors and their countries and how business is done across the different parts of Africa. And I think to inspire other African students to want to, work in different African countries and truly see the opportunities that exist. So it's a great elective. And then there are a couple of other electives that you can do as well, but that's mostly the most significant one that we run each year.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tammy. We've got another good question here in relation to the GMAT, asking how did you guys get over GMAT anxiety, and any tips on how you dealt with the GMAT as a whole?
So yeah, my journey with GMAT was humbling, and I think many of you will relate. So at first I didn't take the exam as seriously because I thought it was just like one of the standard tests that we would take if you wanted to go into university in the country. So I had not put in the effort and the time. And I think people aren't usually honest about how long it takes in terms of time investments to prepare for a GMAT. So one thing I'd be like, give yourself enough time. It will take it will take an investment. What I did is I followed an online course because I found that it was better than me sitting alone and going through the book. So I followed an online course and I did a lot of official GMAT tests at home, because if you have a target mark, I'll call it X, that you want to hit, if you're not able to practice in your own space and hit that mark, I think you'll be looking for a miracle in the examination room, which is possible. But the advice would be try to really prepare, and once you feel you're prepared, take the time to take the official test alone at home before you go to the official.
Yeah, and also just relates to that, I think definitely be prepared, but I think GMAT, a lot of it is a mind game. So when are there on test day, just make sure that you are as calm as possible. Drink water, take as much time as you can before, because as soon as you get in there, it's war.
That's war. You're right. The only other thing I'd add is there's actually a technique to GMAT. It's a strategy thing. It's like, aside from so the content itself is not necessarily difficult, but there is a way to do the GMAT. And I'd say that, before doing it, in fact, before even practicing or studying, research what that strategy is, because there are some tips and tricks that you can use to kind of, for instance, it's multiple choice. You can easily take out, I think it's 2 or 3 of the answers, and then it's 2 that they're close. And then you know that at least your probability is higher that you'll get it right, if that makes sense. So there's a strategy to do the GMAT. So just do some research on that.
Maybe Thursday we'll do a webinar.
We might get back to you about that. So we're quickly running out of time. So just finally, as one last question, we hopefully have lots of people listening in who are maybe thinking about applying to do the programme. So I'm going to ask each of you just to give one piece of advice to anybody who's listening to us in Africa, who's considering applying to do the Oxford MBA. What's the one piece of advice that you would give them?
My one piece of advice would be apply early, because you get more options in terms of scholarships and your confidence.
My advice would be, I don't have ties with Oxford. I'm probably the only one in my clan and in my family to have done an international degree. So don't, I think that's a basis. But what I'm trying to say is apply, give yourself a chance. Don't eliminate. Don't self-eliminate. Put your best foot forward and let the school decide whether you are here or not. And for those who have applied for 1 year and you feel that you've taken maybe 2 years to better your profile, don't let that stop you from applying again.
Yeah, I think just do it is my advice. If you're taking the time to be on this call, you're probably interested and you've done some research. Do not self-doubt, do not question yourself. Find the time, apply, and we think you have a great chance to join a world-class program. And just do it.
And also, don't be afraid to ask, right? Because most of the faculty, the email addresses are up on the website. Don't hesitate to ask. If you have questions, do ask. Even when you get in and you're looking for scholarships, write an email. Don't just sit by. Ask. If you have, don't worry if it's a basic question or not, ask. That's all.
My advice is take a holiday. Because I didn't make a mistake, but I came straight from work into the MBA. The good thing was it's been a step down in terms of intensity. But when Christmas came, I needed that 3 weeks. So yeah, take a holiday before you come.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. So thank you very much to everybody who has dialed in today. We will be emailing the recording of the webinar to all of you as well, and to anybody who has registered. To second what Diane just said there, a lot of people have sent through questions that we haven't managed to answer. If you do have any outstanding questions, having listened today, do please get in touch with the recruitment team here at the business school. We're really happy to help with any specific questions that you have about scholarship opportunities, or I know we've had some through about applying in stage 4 versus applying in stage 1 and different bits and pieces like that. So do please get in touch with the team. We're really happy to help and answer any questions that you might have. And just I'll finish up by saying thank you very much to our wonderful panel for sharing their insights today, and to Tammy as well. Tammy, I don't know if you're still there.
Yes, thank you.
No.
Yeah.
And thank you to Tammy as well for joining us and sharing her insights into the Africa Initiative. Okay, have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.